And something that I've like repeated over and over in my head, whether you're starting a new service, starting a new partnership, looking at a new exit strategy, just like this crawl, walk, run thing, I think is just such an incredible way. Cause like we get excited and we get this like scarcity mindset and this FOMO of like, gotta do it and gotta do it now. And I'm behind. And so sometimes we like just jump in the pool or try to run right away and then, sprain an ankle or are out of the game completely. So
welcome to the Top Tier Podcast, where we take you to new heights in the world of real estate, capital raising, and business entrepreneurship. Meet your hosts, Daniela and Landon, industry experts passionate about success. Join them on the Top Tier Podcast as they share real-world experiences, practical solutions, and strategies to overcome business and real estate challenges. From expert interviews to actionable advice, they aim to inspire and empower you. Subscribe now to never miss an episode. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Top Tier Podcast with Landon and Daniela. We have Mel Palmer with us on today. She's one of my bestest friends. I'm so excited to have her on because I have never borrowed private money. I've only self-funded deals, and Landon has self-funded the majority of his deals. And as we grow as real estate investors, we want to know how to make, how to be able to borrow other people's money, but more importantly, how to be like the most badass borrowers on the planet. And there's no one better to help explain that than Miss Mel Palmer.
Hello.
Hello. Yeah, no, I'm super excited to be here for this one because for me, what I've learned now, I'm purchasing properties now, and I'm at a point where I'm running out of money, of my own money. And I'm also learning that using OPM, other people's money, is critical to scale the business and all the other things that you do. And so it's an entirely different skill set that I'm now elevating myself into and learning beyond just how to get a deal, how to close a deal, how to operate a short-term rental, whatever it may be, but like funding it using other people's money that allows them from an advantageous standpoint make a return and be involved and all those little things. But also too, I always think macro of like eventually I'm going to be in that seat that I'm lending on someone else's deal, and so I put myself in their shoes. And so I'm stoked to hear you talk about things because I always think in that with that in mind as it relates to how to protect the lender on their end, so that I know when I get to that point here in 10, 15, 20 years that I'm lending on stuff, how to protect myself the right way and not the redneck way of just like, hey, here's, I owe you, kind of thing. So I'm stoked to have you here.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I call that redneck way, the know, like, and trust way that everybody kind of pushes and promotes. And that's like, that's surface level, and know, like, and trust goes away pretty quickly once money's exchanged. And sometimes things go a little south when it comes to real estate and, expectations versus reality.
Oh
So
my gosh,
Mel,
yes.
why don't you like give us a tiny background and why you even ended up in this space, where you came from?
Yeah. So my background was 12 years active duty military. I'm now a reservist, so I just hit 17 years. While I was in the Air Force, I was a special agent. So I did our federal investigations and fraud, front company. I did like export enforcement toward the end, where I was out in Hong Kong looking at front companies. And so I've always invested in real estate, using my VA loans, beautiful zero money down, the original zero money down. Um,
Yeah.
and so I had always just invested where I had lived as a military member. And I started with kind of Dave Ramsey mindset. I just bought property with the intent to reduce my living expenses, because in Vegas in 2009, it was actually cheaper to have a 4-bedroom, 3-bathroom property with like a $800 a month PITI, whereas my rent would have been like $950 for a 1-bedroom apartment. So I was just looking to be economical. Somehow having a big old house to yourself is more economical than an apartment. But yeah, so that's like kind of how I got started in real estate. And that federal agent background and that investigator background, once I got into consulting. So About 2 years ago, I was doing transaction management, I was consulting on deal structuring, I was doing, the, underwriting, and, I kept seeing people get into deals with private lenders that would then default 6 months later, and then everybody came back to me to restructure the deals, to help do loan modifications, to help find other lenders. And it just got to this point where I saw a real problem. um, and really the tipping point was, in the meantime, I was um, investing my cash because I had um, made a considerable, a decent amount of money while I was buying and renting and fixing and holding properties and selling them in really, expensive markets that I was able to get into because I had a zero money down option. So I had a house in Hawaii that I did the bigger pockets kind of house hacking, fix and hold, lived in one part of it, rented out the other. When I left, I kind of rented it out almost as a duplex for several years until I was totally the tired landlord that was like, um, 2 sets of, tenants were moving out at the exact same time for the second time during COVID, and I was like, "That's it. This property's worth so much, let me dump it, um, take out take all this equity." I bought a cabin cash, and then I had a bunch more cash that I started lending out. So meanwhile, I'm helping all these other people with their defaulted loans. My loans go into default with 2 no like and trust types that are, held in this high regard and doing all the big deals. And so not only did I see a niche based on my experience as a consultant, but I saw a huge niche and problem in my own experience of basically falling into an affinity fraud kind of scheme because these guys weren't making any money on anything they were doing. They were just robbing Peter to pay Paul. And um, yeah, once that was uncovered, it was kind of it was kind of a problem for me to get my money back because I knew they were just going to rob it from someone else. And so yeah, that's how I got into due diligence. So it's just I realized there wasn't a niche for it. There was a huge problem in these smaller like investment communities, and also a huge opportunity. Like with obstacles come opportunities, and so I knew like I had the investigator skills to be able to be proactive. Because while I really enjoyed being a cop, my least favorite part about it was always reactive. It was always after something bad already happened. And when I found myself helping people with all of these deals gone south, it just felt like being a cop again, and I kind of hated it. So I was like, let me design a process and procedure and service that can help people be proactive instead of reactive, because it's really really hard to unscrew these things once they're already messed up. Whereas there's a lot of very avoidable things that if you got the right processes in place, you can dodge these bullets.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. There's so much to unpack there. What an amazing career and experience you got to have in the journey of life in terms of your employment and your service. And thank you for your service. And I'm so honored to be in this virtual room with you to just chit chat about various things that we coexist in these spaces. And every time you were speaking, I'm thinking about right now we're actively in a lend where we lended out $96,000 to a fix and flipper. It is secured via a first position deed of trust against the property. And we were supposed to receive our money back in August. As we sit here right now, it is October 4th, my mother's birthday, actually. And at this point, like it's the late fees have now exceeded the original principal payback. And so it's at a point where they're we're likely going to foreclose on this person to take the property and then sell the property because she's not willing to refinance into another hard money lender or something like that. And so all those little things like actually happen. Like the good things happen, the returns happen, the paid on time. Like we pay our PML every single month, but like things happen. And so it's so cool to have someone in the trenches like yourself in the room to be able to talk through those things. So I guess from your standpoint, I guess what are your top 3 or 4 red flags that you see from someone that's trying to raise money that you look for that are red flags that they're
Mm.
not talking about, doing, saying, or whatever it may be?
Yeah, so I'll even bring it to general red flags, right? When it comes to somebody asking for funds or raising funds, right? One of the most important things is a very, very clearly articulated statement of use of funds. Like, I want to know what the use of funds is, right? And so, if there's a specific number that's being raised, first of all, that's better than we'll take anything kind of thing, because then I have questions on how many rounds of funds are you raising, how many lenders are you looking to take deals from. So you're in first position in that deal. Well, do you know whether or not they put somebody in second and third position? Do you know whether or not they were trying to, even if they didn't? Things that would really make it less secure. I just want a clearly articulated use of funds, first of all. Second, if we go specific to raising funds, I would want to know, do you have an SEC exemption? Do you have a PPM? PPMs are not required. But if you don't have them, I have a lot more questions on why you don't have one, because they protect you and the lender. So
What's a PPM?
so that's a private placement memorandum. And that gets filed with the SEC. So one, you need to have an exemption. Two, you have these that is something that you file, and it's we could even talk about like single family or less, maybe lower threshold, if you will. Um, it's lower threshold because people get away with SEC violations with it. It doesn't mean it's right, but so if you're raising funds, that statement, that use of funds, I think is really important. And
Mm-hmm.
then that PPM also allows some of the background, education, and experience, something that Daniela, I do when I do my investor passports. So
Yep.
Daniela is an investor passport holder, and it's a service that I provide to allow people to show others that they're trustworthy instead of just tell them. But a PPM is an officially filed, memorandum that tells you what your background, education, and experience is. And that would also mean that there's some fire to, some fuel to burn if things go south and there was any sort of misrepresentation of experience when it
Mm.
comes to, you know, what what you claimed in order to get funds. So yeah,
We
those
see a
are
lot
those
of
are
that.
some of the things that I'd look for. Oh, so much of it, because people like to do quote unquote borrowed experience, and that's cute, but it's fraud. So if you're
Right.
doing it to get funds, you're a cutie fraudster.
So, other general red flags, because we see, like, we're in communities where we see requests for funds all the time, right? It's
Oh yeah.
constant. And so, some of the ones that I'm familiar with as a transaction manager, you talked a lot about how you had done that in the past, and we've like riffed on this so much, what it's like to get inside somebody's transaction and under the hood of their business. And, you know, when people start, like, big red flag for me is like, I need this money tomorrow.
Mm, yeah.
Why?
The
Why?
fire.
It's kind of like all of us. I feel I do feel this way. Like, Landon, you came into this community already having real estate experience. You fund your own deal, so you are the benefactor when it's good, and you are the sufferer when it's bad, and you carry that responsibility. And Mel, you've had the exact same experiences with the investments you have personally funded as well. And I think that when you go through that level of experience, and you burn yourself, right? Like, you recover, you learn how to recover yourself before you even get into a place where you're borrowing other people's money. And so, folks that sustainably build their businesses like this, through trial and error of their own means, they understand that just coming out with like a announcement that they need this much funds tomorrow is absolutely absurd, right? Like, Landon, you're spending so much time building relationships right now. And you have spent so much time over the last few years building relationships for the people that you are thinking of approaching to fund different investments for yourself. Mel, you have spent significant time creating relationships. Same with myself. Like, I couldn't think of like blasting out a request like that into the
Right.
ether and just hoping that I actually got somebody responsible in return. Like, to me, that's just like a Wild West marketplace. So to me, that's a red flag. Landon, when you see requests for money, is there anything that ever sort of tips your ear where you're like, that was weird?
Yeah, I think for me, the biggest thing that, and again, I haven't lended a ton of money. We do a lot of transactional lending, EMDs, double closes, like a lot of that stuff, very basic things. But this one was our first kind of fix and flip lend, and and in that, she dotted every I, she crossed every T. But when it comes to like what I see in our feeds that come across that I look at, like for me, I'm so much a rapport whore. Like I live in like I want to know who you are. I want to know like what you do. Like the work that I do is the filter. Like, and I even think like to the point this goes. Danielle is going to laugh that in the book "Buy Back Your Time" by Dan Martell, when you're hiring someone, he always talks about work with someone before you work with someone. And so similarly in that regard, so like I like to see if I see a name raising money, I like to know prior to that, I've seen them do deals. I've seen them operate and provide value to other people. They're involved in the community. Like they're a name that I know. It's not just John Smith that's in there that joined yesterday and is trying to raise money and just leveraging a community just to be a part of it. So for me, and that might be a conservative approach that but for me as like a very novice lender, if you will, I see that, and those are red flags for me. It's I'm going to lend on someone on deals and with people and operators that I know actively own and operate properties and or real estate properties and have raised money before or borrowed money before, and they have other private money lenders. I want to know that, not to say that, just because I do that, it's still unsecured, and you can add all these protections, but at least at the very, I can sleep easy knowing that, there's other people that they've borrowed money from. I know who they are to a certain level. I have their cell phone number and all those little things.
Where
So
they
for me,
live.
that's kind of the level. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Get their driver's license, have me do the background checks. I will say,
so
yeah,
true.
I'll say like, um, while no like and trust is not sufficient, it is absolutely, I think, an important threshold to cross because I think you said like with someone before you work with someone. I had really good advice because at one point I was considering partnering with, some pretty big people in the industry, and I was kind of struggling with it, got a couple like attorneys consult and a couple other people that I was just kind of struggling with the decisions because it didn't feel right and the conversations weren't going well, and it wasn't like and I say weren't going well as in they didn't feel good.
Mm.
And I always tell people like this is a marriage. And first of all, most marriages fail, or like half of them, sorry. And then second of all, the uh statistics with a business marriage being a partnership are even worse, right? And so when you're starting with cold feet and you're starting with icky feelings, it's just like I think that no like and trust factor is important. Who people are um behind closed doors, beyond the public appearance, beyond the face. And so I got a some really good advice from a cousin. And there was one point when I was just struggling with the conversation. My husband was like, "Why don't you talk to Tyler?" And I was like, "Tyler? What the hell? How did I not think of that about that?" His cousin, my married cousin, was one of the like very first employees of Patreon, was a shareholder, like in the like 10 years in Patreon. And so he saw them go from startup to just this massive company, fantastic person. He does venture capital investing now. And I'm like, why the hell wouldn't I like tap into this like familial resource of mine? Oh my gosh. Thank you. Where were you like 2 months ago while I've been toiling over this decision? And I talked to him, and Tyler was just like, I just like crawl, walk, run. Like it sounds like you're not really into this. Um, and what's funny is I already crawled and it didn't work out well. And then so we kind of tabled and didn't do the partnership. And then I walked. And then I did a full, course, freely offering my intellectual property. And that didn't go well either. And I was like, whew, okay, so why run? Why run? Like, no. So I thought that was really good advice. And something that I've like repeated over and over in my head, whether you're starting a new service, starting a new partnership, looking at a new exit strategy, just like this crawl, walk, run thing, I think is just such an incredible way, because like we get excited and we get this like scarcity mindset and this FOMO of like gotta do it and gotta do it now and I'm behind, and so sometimes we like just jump in the pool or try to run right away and then sprain an ankle or are out of the game completely. So anyway.
It's so true. It's so true. I mean, I even just in the investing space, let alone the lending space. Like right now, we have a deal. We're in escrow for I want to say I think 10 or 11 deals. Daniela's like drowning right now, which is great. And we have one deal in east of Knoxville, Tennessee. I don't own any property in Tennessee. I've never been to Tennessee. Not that I'm afraid of it, but moreover, like the deal is so good. It's I think we're buying it for 285,000 or something. It's a 4 bed, 2 bath, and we're buying it at $15,000 down, 0% interest. So it's principal only payments, like absurd deal, really good deal structure. It'll cash flow 800-900 bucks a month. And the ego in me, the person who wanted to buy the deal, the emotionally tied, like, oh, let's just get another one, was like, go for it. Let's get another one. But then the binoculars of just hyper focusing on what we're trying to do when it comes to self storage and other things and staying in my lane took a step back. And I felt like it was a very mature decision because I wanted to buy it. I did. Like, even like right now, I have inklings of regret. But I also know, like, if I start chasing terms, chasing deals, and start doing these things all over, like, I'm going to have properties that are just overwhelming and then have a very similar situation to what you had, two vacancies. Or our last recording, we spoke to Stephen Hunt, and he had, what was it, 7 vacancies at the same time or something like that. And it was like,
Brutal.
okay, I need to focus on like stay in my lane, and whatnot, and focus on the areas that I already have properties I can invest in and whatnot. And so it's so real. It's so real because it's so easy right there to just chase that. Because I have the money from I've raised the money from my private money lenders for that deal. I could be in the deal for $0. So it's like almost like validation of like, let's do it again. And so you hit such a good mindset right there of crawl, walk, run. So great.
Yeah, and it's crazy because going back to what, like, we've had this revelation with all these people we've been talking to, and I think it's because a lot of us started at the same time, and so we've been like in different corners. Some of us 6 degrees of separation, but all
Yeah.
kind of coming to the same realizations at the same time, where it's not about the number of doors. It's not about like the numbers is irrelevant. It's about being able to have a span of control over what you're doing and capitalize on those opportunities, like multiple levers. And I think this is where the private money thing gets so dangerous, is when you do learn how to raise private money, when you are that charismatic personality and you are seemingly operating all of these things super well, like you're checking the boxes of the trust, know, verify, kind of, sort of. We have this you put out this perception of, I live, eat, and breathe this, and all of the things, and maybe for a while you are, and maybe for a while you're killing it, and you're making those returns, and you're a responsible borrower, and all those things, and then you go one too far, and it topples the whole, or you go out of your market, or you make a poor choice, a bad buy, simple bad buy, right? But you're so overextended, you can't accept that you're overextended because you keep buying on terms, like what Landon's saying. I couldn't turn it down. I had the money, I had the support, I had the systems, or so I thought. Good people overextending themselves, making bad decisions with other people's hard-earned money, and then all of a sudden, what can be done? And they
Yeah.
start not picking up the phone, and at
Yeah.
that
Well, they just
point,
get overwhelmed. Yeah.
that point, the person who lent the money is sitting there going, looking at your YouTubes and going, shit, shit. I did not get a personal guarantee. I did not cross collateralize. I did not get a lender's policy. I did not go down my checklist because I did not have a checklist, because I saw them doing the thing. I believed in their ability to do the thing. And for whatever reason, they cannot do the thing anymore with my money. and I'm
Oh,
proverbially effed.
right.
Like, then what, Mel?
Yeah.
Like, then what?
And you're trying to untangle a yarn ball, or like, you know, you ever untangle like 6 necklaces? You gotta fucking toss them at that point. It's like not happening. It's not happening. Yeah, it's, you know, it's the ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And sometimes people just get caught up and get, you know, one, they're getting pressure because they got the person that's saying, I need this in 24 hours, 48 hours. Two, they're chasing the returns, not the actual information, right? So I say you can't invest in the deal. Deals don't default, people do, right? Like a really bad person can make a good deal sour, right? You can't invest in the person because people drip honey when they want your money. They're going to freaking tell you anything. They're going to be so charismatic, so sweet. They're on it, right? And but you've got to invest in the verified information. So I'd even say like you invest in the information, but the verified information. And it's not trust but verify. It's don't trust, verify, because people get caught up in the trust part and like, I know you're good for it. Um, and I don't know what I need. And so instead of figuring out what I need, I'm just going to place the majority of my feeling of security, not my actual security, my feeling of security and my feeling for you. And that's where people run into issues and they're trying to untangle things after the fact. But if they just did the steps and took the time in the first place, they wouldn't be in that position.
Okay.
It's interesting.
Yeah. So,
That drip your honey for money. For the record, I will be using that in the future, and Daniela knows it. That's going to
I
be
know.
coming out right here in
Yeah.
the future. I heard
I,
that, and I was like,
I you
start
should
it.
have like trademarked that before you talk to Landon.
Oh my
Yeah,
gosh.
it's all
Oh
over.
my gosh. That's so good. That was so
It's
good.
true.
No, it's
It
so
is all
great.
over
I mean,
your
there's
content.
what's that?
I said it's definitely all over her content, which is awesome.
Oh, perfect. That's great.
But okay, so then let's backtrack here. Like we've talked about a couple of red flags. All right. So aside from the stuff that we've talked about, you know, what are when people are going, okay, I have underwritten the deal. I have verified this person because I paid somebody or a service to run a background check and a credit report. So because they're telling me they have 300 properties, I want to verify. So this was a part of my investor passport, Landon. Like Mel did a deep dive on me. She did and she was very, very forward with me, which was amazing because it was like, Daniela, all this is a stamp in time that represents who you are in this moment in time. Credit reports fluctuate, background checks change. Like these things change, right? But right now, in this moment in time, this is the kind of investor you are to lend on. And so she did a full credit report, background check. You know, she asked me questions like, what properties you hold, what debt do you have on them, the addresses, and she verified that I actually owned those properties. And so a lot of what we're saying is like that shared experience, right? Like you, Landon, are a real short-term rental operator. This is not a farce. It is real, you know? And by somebody verifying that information about you, it's just like, cool. He actually does have properties he can cross collateralize. And so this question, when I'm about to ask him to cross collateralize this, it's like, okay, cool, which one? You know? And so okay, we've moved to the red flags. We got a vibe for the person, started to get to know them. We've ran those background checks and those credit reports. You decide, you underwrite the property, you feel secure in the deal. And now, how do I open escrow and like make sure that I have the things that I need to go through the actual transaction and securitize myself?
Yeah. So a lender will want to make sure that they've got their term sheet and escrow instructions. And that can be 2 documents or one document, but that's going to you know, kind of dictate the terms that they're lending on, right? And that's when you go through your institutional bank and they give you 100 pages of what the terms are. And there's the due on sale in there is that there are you know, certain representations and warranties that are associated with your approval for this loan. There's what position the loan's in, what percentage it is, what the payment terms are, right? So all of that is what the lender would provide to escrow to be able to open escrow and dictate the terms of how they can close and fund. But what you see more often than not is people are just like, all right, ready to go.
JV
And they think
agreement.
everybody else is going to take care of it. And so I say, you want to be the bank, but banks have professional processes. So do you, because you come into this, act like you're the bank, but then think you're a passenger. Like, you better be driving a little bit, or at least telling the driver what's up, because if you're the bank, you need to protect your money. Nobody else is going to.
So then, as a responsible borrower, like for somebody, excuse me, looking to raise capital, I feel as if approaching a lender that's interested in lending on your project, aside from kind of putting together like an offering memorandum and, sort of kind of going like the traditional route of going like, this is the project, this is the deal, this is the story, this is the vision, this is the exit. Providing maybe some sort of checklist, like, we are going to move you through all of these different things so I'm going to need from you your term sheet. I'm going to need from you like these different things, and I am going to provide to you these things in escrow. So I feel like that, that Landon, where I'm going, you had asked earlier, what would make somebody interested in lending to me? I think that makes a huge difference when you have professional processes as a borrower. If
Yeah,
we're going to
for sure.
expect our lenders to have professional processes, then as borrowers, we should also have professional processes.
And
And
I
I
would
think that
say,
stand out.
yeah, stand out for sure. And I would even say there's a responsibility to, if you're raising funds, knowing you're doing it from people that are not experienced, knowing that you're doing it to quote unquote help them. If that's really what you're doing, you want to make sure that you're being transparent about those processes and procedures and what they should have to protect them. And while I primarily, my clients and my messaging is primarily targeted toward telling lenders like, this is your responsibility, at the same time, to be a good borrower of private money, I would say, you could lead with that responsibility as well and kind of usher it for them.
Hmm.
Interesting. Interesting. This is so awesome. This is so great to hear about this because I mean, I had so many questions come up in regards to, you touched on something earlier with these this thing. Maybe you could actually go a little bit deeper on this a little bit more. We've touched on it, is the investor passport.
Yeah.
We kind of skirted it a little bit because I've heard of it out in the distance in the spheres that we all live in. What is this? Where does this live? How does someone find this? And what value does it provide the borrower as well as the lender on those things? Very baseline level stuff.
Yeah. So investor passports can be for anyone, whether it's a borrower or a lender. I do think it's primarily a borrower product, because when people are seeking funds, they usually need some sort of credibility. Because people aren't really sure, like, if they don't have the know, like, and trust factor, they're like, I don't know you. How am I supposed to trust you? And it's not to say that they don't like them. It's just like, I don't know you. You're asking for funds. First of all, like, don't try to kiss on the first date. And but um, second of all, like, or don't do a marriage proposal on the first date,
Oh,
right?
okay. Right.
It is like,
Maybe,
what the hell?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Why
No,
are we here?
maybe it's not the kiss. Maybe it's the proposal, right? When you're asking for hundreds of thousands of dollars, you're like, damn, I don't know if I want to get married yet. I
I
don't even
guess
know
that's
you.
fair.
So just thinking about leading with your strengths, leading with your values, leading with so what the passport is itself is both a consultative service and a product. And the product is a one-page website that displays the third-party verified background, education, experience, assets, income, and credit. So some people don't have a lot of experience, but they had an entire career as an engineer, right? And one of my clients, Ralph Pombo, was maybe 2 single family properties in, prior to joining mentorships and trying to raise capital for fix and flips. He'd used a couple of traditional loan products in the past, and he had considerable funds. So for him, he found it really difficult to make connections and get funding and have anybody give his deals, you know, uh, 2 seconds of their time. So he came to me for an investor passport. He was actually, I want to say like the first client or at least the second client, came to me for a passport, immediately got funded. The guy's had seven more properties since, and he hasn't even had his passport for a year. He has no problem funding. He's you know, grown his portfolio, he's grown his experience to the point where I don't think he necessarily needs a passport anymore, but he actually chose to update it. And some of his private lenders like to use me as a
Mhm.
service to be able to update that so that they don't have to go through the process of verifying his assets themselves. And so and he also likes that because then it, keeps their relationship nice and cordial. And I get to be, the gnat asking for nitnoid details and being pleasant about it. Right, Danielle?
Very pleasant, very pleasant. But it's a super deep dive. And I will say, which is really interesting, I still have not solicited any funds for projects, but it's interesting because once I had my investor passport, I was like, Mel, people would be asking, hey, I want to lend to people with their investor passports. And I always had my hand raised, and Mel would always tag me. But what's very interesting about this is what the investor passport also does is it forces you to clearly display your vision and be accountable to that instead of doing what you're talking about, Landon, like, oh, Tennessee, but I've never been there. I've got no business being there. Do I really want to be there? And when I did this with Mel, Landon, I was just getting into commercial. And I had just closed the chapter on Bend, and I was like, no more residential for me. And like, I'm like seeing all these opportunities and going, I have my investor passport, like people will lend me money, I could totally do another residential investment. And having to be responsible to the fact that in my passport I clearly say I want to invest in commercial assets with triple net leases and business acquisitions. Like, that's what I say. I married myself to that, and I had to remain accountable to that, which is hilarious because now, as we move into self storage, I have this beautiful like thing that goes, I'm staying true to what my skill set is, what my goals are, because I am proposing marriage to you and saying, these are my true intentions as an investor. This is like my heart. This is what I want to do. And these are all the things that verify that I'm just not a really good salesperson, that I'm legit and true to myself and my word, and I have integrity in what I do. And that's exactly what the passport does, is it brings like a depth to your integrity in your public presentation to others. And I feel like it helps people capture you in a way that can't really be captured on Instagram or YouTube or, on a Zoom. It's really like, all right, here it is. This is me. These are my goals. And with that said, though, my investor passport is almost like 8 months old. So like, it's wonderful that I have it. There are people that we know that will probably be approaching for funds. We can say, like, Daniela has her investor passport, but it's something that I will probably want to get updated so that I feel like I am being a responsible borrower, because that was a stamp in time. Right. And so I feel like, doing these things, it's so minor. It's such a minor cost in the grand scheme of things to get your investor passport, to go through the motions and the time it took to put that together. But you're going up to borrowers with their super duper hard earned money, and you're going, I will go above and beyond and above and beyond and above and beyond again and again and again to show you who I am and that I'm a responsible borrower. And you're also, though, making that commitment to yourself as an investor, and you're forcing yourself to like stay accountable to your goals. So it's this really weird, like, holistic, it's not weird, but what I found was weird is that it ended up being this very holistic thing. Like, it wasn't just, I don't know, she like really forces you to like go all deep and woo woo and shit.
Yeah,
So
so that's why I call it a consultative product, because we go through what it ends up being is mission, vision, values. But of course, I can't just ask you that out front, because it's like a blank sheet of paper that people would just stare at and never complete, right? And so we go through this process of kind of uh, digging into it. And I went to Middlebury Institute here in Monterey for grad school, and we did these workshops all the time. And they were these client-based workshops. I thought it was like such an incredible program because everything was very practical, and we had clients that were like local um, nonprofits and businesses, and we would always just work through like organizational values and individual values and marry up, hearts and minds, rather, like your thoughts, feelings, and actions. So if you're saying something, right, is that represented in your mission? If you're doing something, does that go along with what your organizational goals are? And so just making sure that everything's marrying up as far as thoughts, feelings, and actions, and just um like you said, I'm saying I want to do this, if I recall correctly, because a lot of people do this, but in the beginning I'll have part of the exercise being like, what's your lend box or your buy box or whatever, what are your target investments? And people will be like, just everywhere, anything, like just spaghetti on the wall, right? And it'll be like, I want to do this in this market, I want to do that in that market, I want to do this. And it's like, okay, well, now let's go back to your values. Now let's see, does this align with what you said you wanted to do? And then what you're seeking to do. And so just making sure to whittle it down, marry them up, and make it all congruent.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, it's super intentional. And as I'm sitting here listening to Daniela describe it, and you as well too, I mean, it is quantitative, but it's also qualitative too. And you're the research of the borrower. And I can even see for myself, I mean, this is obvious, but like having that is a level and layer of credibility to hand to
Mhm.
any potential lender. And even too, if I'm sitting in the other driver's seat, other stakeholder position as a lender, it seems to me like something I should require upon my borrower as a part of the transaction too. Even if I do know them, as like, hey, let's get our passports, and we're going on this travel together. And so that's so great. Where do we find that? Is that on investorpass.com? Like, what is that? Where does someone go about the process of going through that process?
Yeah, so capitalverified.com is
Oh, perfect.
my website, and straight from that first page you can actually get started there, and there's an additional info page with some video testimonial and some reviews from some of my clients as well, if they're like, yeah. But we talk about the service itself, the timeline, the price, and then there's a whole bunch more if people want to continue to kind of see if it's a right fit for them. And that's where people say what it did for them. And it pays for itself as long as you've got deals. If you've got deals that need to be funded, I find that it's a pretty friction-free way to get funding.
That is a really
Undoubtedly. I mean,
great way, friction free.
yeah, it's so true. I mean, with anything in life, like I've learned as we've gotten further along here in any industry, real estate, whatever it may be, is that you have to pay to play at certain levels and certain to do anything the right way. Is like to get into those smaller rooms, you have to pay to get into those smaller rooms. To do deals that you want to be doing, there's a knowledge gap, a competency gap that you have to learn, and the shortcut to do so is to pay to learn those skills and various things. Anyways, and so no different than raising capital. It seems like to prove to your borrower that you're a human and that you can't your the likelihood of you paying them back is stronger. It seems like, I guess a question for you would be, and you may not know the stat, from the people who have received their passports through you and through this, I guess, do you have the ability to know the quality of that person in terms of their the record that they have of those funds, of how many people have maybe lost their passport because of poor management of funds or those kind of things? I think you know what I'm getting at.
Yeah. So they're absolutely revocable, and that's in my client service agreement. And then I do have what's called the blacklist. So people are able to submit any defaulted borrowers to me, or any connectors that are perhaps facilitating the borrowing of funds. And so it is a private list. It's not publicly available, but it helps me, track and manage some of the people that are requesting um, passports from me, right? Or some of the people that are involved in a due diligence transaction in which I'm being hired to look at the deal of the person and verify the information and produce a report. And so when it comes to private loans, a lot of this stuff won't show up on a background check if it was
Yeah.
not brought to court. So it is another metric that I use in addition to all of the other sources that I use to verify information. And so one of the features of the passport that is offered is an area for reviews to be left. So I'll send out, so if somebody claims that they've borrowed private funds before, I confirm that, right? I say don't trust, verify, so I operate by the same principles. And so um some of these borrowers have a whole, you know, list of lenders that can also confirm and provide feedback on what working with them was like. And so um that's always available, and it's always revocable. But I don't I was an investigator. I understand there's two sides to a story, right? And so um I like to use it as a conversation starter. When I was an investigator, you can't use polygraphs in a court of law, but you can use it as an indicator for a conversation starter. So if someone fails a certain question, I'm going to ask a whole bunch of questions about that. And same with if somebody gets reported on that list, oh, I've got a whole bunch of questions for you. And depending on the disposition and the answers and the confirmations is how we will proceed. So
I think one thing that you touched on that is so good because when I was first attempting to raise money and raise capital for my deal that I funded with my PML Kim, um, I seeked out. I put out the post. I'm seeking X funds for, and here are the terms and all the little things. And the responses weren't really the private money lenders. And I'll tell you where I found my PML, which is pretty funny. But it's moreover the people who DM'd me and contacted me were what you just said, connectors. And it's really interesting you touched on that of like how you could blacklist connectors because there's so many people who just want to be who just get a piece of a deal by connecting someone who needs money and someone who has money. And I think that's so smart. I think that's so great that you play a role in verifying them too and hold them accountable because they could just be freewheeling and have no checks and balances. And I think that's great that you're checking those people. That's awesome.
yeah, it's unlicensed brokering if you don't have an actual part in a role or responsibility in the transaction beyond just the acquisition. And so um, what I've found is there are some people that are perpetually and repeatedly connecting on known defaulters. And I do feel very strongly about the fact that everybody should be able to make mistakes. I do. But once you know better, you better do better. And I feel like a lot of people just play this I'm not responsible. Um and it's like, yeah, you're right. You're not a responsible person, is what you aren't responsible. Like you're not.
Yeah.
You've proven that. And people confuse liability with responsibility, and it's like, you're either responsible or you're not. I'm not talking about liability. Like you, you need to be an ethical person in these transactions to, be entitled. Entitled is the wrong word, but be worthy of anybody's funds or time.
It's so true. I mean, there's such a blurred line between the word fault and responsibility, and you just nailed it. Yeah, that is spot on. Oh man, there's so many stories of hearing. I would love to hear, and I know we can't talk names, and that's not fair to anyone there. But like some of the horror stories that you've seen now because you've done the investor passport for some time now, so like I guess is there any juicy stories that came out that you could share, obviously not with names or anything, but that would be an interesting story that you've seen on a lending deal that you've been kind of 5,000 foot involved in the passport process?
Yeah, so I'll just speak to my personal experience because I do like to, keep client, I'll share stories sometimes, but just to keep it personal here, I got involved with these individuals who were elevated and considered OGs and leaders, and doing all the big deals. And um, that's where I got involved in three different ways. One was lending. So $80,000 loan that's supposed to be for some, impressive Airbnb on a 10-acre property. in a national park in the middle of nowhere, right? Yeah, there's flag number one that I teach people now, because I also tell people there's a difference between knowledge and wisdom. Like wisdom is earned, right? Knowledge is learned. But I've got the wisdom for some of these red flags that in hindsight you can see, and then over the course of time I see repeatedly with other clients that run into some tough situations. But back to this deal, it was this large property that was going to be a wedding venue, and these glamp pods, and the whole shebang. Just beautiful presentation, good numbers, they all check out as far as underwriting. Amazing. Boom, there's one. All right, number two. Oh, we also already purchased the property, so we're ready to rock and roll, ready to fund and go. Number two is a partnership. It's a Section 8 long-term rental partnership to acquire properties in Memphis. And the individuals had been operating in Memphis since 2018. This was in 2022. We're October 2022. It's about 2 years in default at this point. All right. And then the third part was raising capital for a boutique hotel. All right.
That's a
And
wide variety of opportunities.
wide variety of opportunities for two people.
Flag number
Uh,
2.
yeah. And so when we go to background, education, experience, assets, income, and credit, these two are very experienced wholesalers. What does this have to do with operating a wedding venue, with managing a boutique hotel and raising capital for it, right? With a Section 8 long-term buy and hold operation? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. But this boutique hotel specifically was what was being touted at the masterminds of what these individuals were doing that was so hot and so next level, right? And so talk about that PPM, not a single thing. Talk about the paperwork, wasn't there. But don't worry, hopes and dreams are being sold at a premium. And so uh the wheels came off when two things were happening. One, my loan wasn't being paid. Now, they originally just wanted a balloon payment in 6 months. And I was like, I knew enough to know you're out of your mind. You're going to make a monthly payment to me. One. And did they make those monthly payments? Well, the couple that they made late every single time they were late. And beautiful thing upon looking at the paperwork, they removed the default terms and considerations. Love
Whoa.
that. I added some in because I thought that was nuts. And I knew enough to know that. But other teeth were also removed from that agreement first. Second, they did this cute thing, which I see, especially with like some of the older paperwork when people didn't know better, do better, right? But when people legitimately didn't know better, they do these things where they call it a promissory note and deed of trust. Well,
Mhm.
those are two separate documents, not one, right?
Mhm.
And so I had a promissory note and deed of trust. So once I realized, only 3 months later, that these were different things, and I wanted to make sure that these different things were accomplished, they were like, "Oh no, 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 you already have that." And I was like, "Oh no, 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 let's make sure it's recorded." Oh, well, we don't need to record that.
Oh.
Okay, got some more red flags, right? Payments not being made. All right, you don't want to record this? That's interesting. Also, I did mention that they already bought it. They bought it sub 2 and already had an $80,000 loan on it. I was another $80,000.
Oh no, third lane.
Yeah. So
Ugh.
getting back to what I was telling you guys earlier, where you want to make sure you understand with that raise, how much is being raised, what position you're in, whether or not there's people after you, because people think they're good just because they're in first. If you're taking over that asset, depending on how you're taking it over, you might be stuck with those other liens. You also might be stuck with a longer process while trying to erase those liens if you're going into the foreclosure process, depending on your state, depending on ABC, XYZ, right? So there's one thing when bells are ringing, I'm freaking out a little bit, but we're still in partnership, right? So we're working on our Section 8 acquisitions, and I'm seeing the wheels come off there too. They stop showing up to meetings. Every time they do come to the meetings, they're repeating the same things. One starts ghosting altogether, and he was supposed to be the Section 8 expert.
Master.
So neat. Okay. Well, why are the wheels coming off? Because these guys continued to raise. They continued to pitch like these haphazard deals in all sorts of markets. They had an almost identical investor that was in another buy and hold operation in Memphis, who I identified and then reached out to. He was also hung up in 3 different operations with them, one being the buy and hold, where he was the capital, just like me, one being this boutique hotel, which he was an LP allegedly, and then the third being a property that they purchased together that he was the capital for.
So this
So
is like multiple. This is not just this is this
it's
is
called
like
a pattern of behavior. Yeah.
multiple level scheme. Like this is a super gnarly, like multiple cobwebs budgeled up into a corner of your house that has a beehive in the middle of it. Like that's
Yeah.
insane.
Yeah. And criminal intelligence me is like, oh no, this is a pattern. And so I also find out that same property that was purchased sub to with 80K private lender with me unrecorded also had another unrecorded 60K against it. Mind you,
Wow.
we all know sub twos typically don't have equity. So this property doesn't even have sufficient funds to pay that first actually recorded lien, much less these other two. But don't worry, it's going to be this high cash flowing operation. So it doesn't matter what the equity is, right? But oh, the wells messed up. And oh, it turns out nobody wants to have a wedding out in the middle of nowhere. So
God.
so all these like horrible things, mind you,
Oh,
they allegedly furnished the whole place with all this cash that they definitely just pocketed. They stopped paying the underlying sub two, so they screwed the sub two sellers, the people who actually held the mortgage. They screwed that private lender who was recorded against it because there was insufficient collateral to actually pay them out when they did foreclose on it, they being the mortgage company, the bank. And then 3, me and another wild 60K was out there doing things. So I now go in investigator mode and I'm trying to find everybody. And I find 8 more people that they're in default with. And so
that's pretty
all
juicy, Landon.
unsecured.
I don't know.
Yeah, all unsecured, all with these cute little um promissory note and deed of trust, a sandwich combo, and just a very nefarious, completely intentional, misrepresented bit of experience, bit of intention and use of funds, and then just a sandwich you don't want to eat, because I don't even want any of your properties, because you guys have proven to me you don't know how to acquire properties worth anything. You're incapable of managing properties worth anything. And so everything's underwater. They don't even have assets that are worth touching. And the amount of other lenders that are looking for a bite is just, enough to mean that there's nothing left to share. And so um that was the big the big messy one, that I got to learn a lot of lessons through helping other people. I was able to get one of the lenders secured on a property, and he was able to get paid out, I think, about 80% of what he was owed. And obviously not great. I'm like, I get payments every once in a while, and promises of tomorrow and at the end of the month and next week and end of the year, and it's October 2024. This started in October 2022. So that's like the biggest, messiest one, and a fun one because it's a threefer. We got a little triplex of a mess.
You know what though, Mel? What's crazy to me is like the connection between the story you just told of you literally 2 years ago to you now. Like the personal growth you've been through has been some of the most painful. I'm sure humiliating to yourself because you're super hard on yourself. You're type A, just
Oh,
like me, where you're going to like abuse yourself over the mistakes you make more than anyone else.
yeah.
And also, I keep like going like back to this investor passport in my head and just going like, oh my God, man, these guys would have never gone through that coriander. They would have never been able to make it through that sieve of, even just being intentional about what you want to accomplish as an investor and, the level of depth that you are forced to sort of explain to others, about yourself, your intentions, your integrity, your capability, your operational skill set, just everything. And I hear this story and it's so top level blasphemous. It's so offensive on so many levels. But at the same point in time, if you would have never gone through that, you would never, ever, ever have been able to help the people that you've helped. I mean,
Yeah.
and it's funny because like I'm sitting here in my head, like dusting off my investor passport, going, I'm so freaking proud that I got that because now I'm so proud to show other people that I can responsibly borrow their money. And like what a game changer that is in going back to Landon's thing, how do you stand out as somebody that can responsibly borrow from other people? I mean, I hate that you went through this. Like as your friend, I hate that you're going through this and that you're dealing with these schmucks still to this day. But at the same point in time, I'm going, you get to still come and tell this story publicly every time. And they have to sit with that. And it
Yeah.
just is what it is. And you can help people avoid just like the trauma that people like this put you through. Because sometimes when people are so when they're so freely awful and horrific, it's like shocking. Like there's a
Yeah.
level of just like people like this exist, and it's
Yeah.
because they are so wide and far different from us, right?
Yeah.
Like
Our
I
values are for us, right? They're not for projecting on other people, and there's no
no.
world in which these people don't exist, and there's actually, like, so many stories just like this, somebody else might think this is about them, right? So, that's the crazy part is, it's not unique, it's unfortunate, it's not, it's, an ugly truth, but it's not unique, and, even with these 2 bozos, I found 8 other people, and that's just who I found. Not to mention, they're still buying, they're still raising, they're still doing stuff. And so, considering they've got patterns of behavior, one, uh, could, I think, reasonably assume that they're continuing to operate in the way that is comfortable to them. And so, I think, um, at the end of the day, like sharing that story and going through the experience has been really helpful for me to reframe it because the same with, wisdoms earned, not learned. Um, the kick to actually change my services was because who like there's the 2 paths that one can go on. They can go on the why me, right? What did I do to deserve this? Or why not me? I'm actually a really good person for that to happen to because I'm in a good position to actually do something about it, help other people and transform this experience whereas saying it's not a unique experience, everybody else just licks their wounds and either gives up or comes back later and with a fury to make sure they can, recoup those losses or not make those mistakes again. But what I've done is made this um, something that other people can learn from um and not have to get that hard-earned wisdom and they can trust that it is avoidable um and you don't actually have to go through that to that degree. I'm not saying people won't run into mishaps and mess ups and problems with their investments. You most certainly will, and they wouldn't have the reward wouldn't be there if the risk wasn't also there. So if you want something guaranteed, you shouldn't be an investor.
I guess my question here, hearing that story is jaw dropping. And like you said too, it's prevalent everywhere in the spheres that are around the real estate space and all those things. Anyways,
Venture
so I guess at
capital.
what point venture capital, everything. So I guess at what point do criminal charges, lawsuits, and all of those things take place? Because you mentioned that these people are still out there raising capital and raising money and putting other people at risk. Because I think about what you touched on a minute ago of like you going through that and I now me being in this room in this sphere has allowed me to know the right way to borrow money, the right way to lend money, blah blah blah. But what you just did and what you went through didn't just affect my life, it's affecting my daughter's life and my son's life moving forward to protect their inheritances and protecting their assets that they're going to take on. And also for me, I'm going to teach them the right way to borrow money for when they get to of age and all those things. And so kudos to you that you took that painful thing that happened for you and projected it in a positive light for others to flourish. And so, genuinely, thank you. And I know that so many people out there feel the same way. But I guess from at what level is there accountability beyond just, foreclosing on a property?
Yeah, so I would go back to that conversation that we kind of touched on earlier where there's there's liability and responsibility, right? And so um, while private lenders aren't liable for the fact that people rob them or default or whatever, there's the responsibility part that you can choose to assume or not. And I think it is a highly um, personal choice because sometimes there's a sunk cost in being a dog with a bone is like, bro, you want to make some lemonade or are you just gonna continue to complain about everything being sour? And so for me, I didn't see any juice to squeeze out of seeking legal remedies because I already did all of their asset kind of um, sorry. I did my little investigation into their assets and the performance and worthiness of what they had. And they might have other ones, but from what I saw, um, they had so many non-performing, underperforming um, properties lost to HMLs, foreclosures, things that I was just like, it's already so much loss, like chasing that down is going to be an incredible continued loss on funds, time, and energy. And so um, I think there's a responsibility to either seek out legal remedies or cut your losses, be a smart investor, like make some lemonade out of it where you can, even if that's just a hard learned lesson, right? And so um how do you hold them accountable? I mean, personally, I think it's a lot of social responsibility, right, for holding them
Mm.
some social responsibility for others just reporting where they can, right? Some will report to organizations. Most organizations don't do anything. Um, Most of them want to make sure, most of them are so concerned about the liability piece that they take no responsibility. So you'll see this even in educational institutions beyond, like these coaching spheres. Universities won't hold people responsible because they want the judicial system to do it, right? They don't want their university tied to it. Same with a lot of these coaching organizations. Um, oh, we have nothing to do with that. We're not liable. We're not liable. And so I think it's individuals making sure to report it where they can. I created a service so that free reporting mechanism so people could do that. Uh, and then there's other.
Yeah, and we're just a bottle of laughs today with all these coughs.
You guys in California, man, you guys got to work on your air quality out there.
I just put another cough drop in my mouth.
It's fine. It's all good.
Woof. Yeah. So I mean, some people try to create these spaces where it can be openly aired, but you know, I try to stay away from that. because if people are just doing the due diligence stuff in the first place, you can weed out a lot of the you can sift through a lot of the trash, right? And get to the gold, because when we were talking earlier about, the FOMO and the desire to more, and whether it's more markets, or more doors, or new exit strategies because it's the shiny object and popular thing to do right now. Um,
Yeah.
I think it comes back down to those values, back down to, not to be cheesy, but like, I think the why is said a lot, but not understood a lot. And really understanding the why. Otherwise, you're building an empire on with no foundation. It's just like, just it's gonna topple. It's not gonna feel good. And yeah, as long as you're starting there, you can kind of avoid working with some of these ding dongs before even having to go down all the other avenues of avoidance.
Mel, thank you so much for being willing to share that freaking unbelievable story and just taking us through what it looks like to stand out as a borrower, what it looks like as a lender to look for a responsible borrower. I know you have other services that you offer besides your investor passport. I would love for you to share where people can find you, where they can find, they can work with you, they can book time with you, and they can pay nominal fees for lessons that will pay forward for them in substantial ways. I mean, when I look back at what I paid for my investor passport, it's like a blink. I never think about it because of the level of what it gives for me to accomplish what we're hoping to accomplish in the next year with my partners, Landon and Chris. Like, it's just a drop in the bucket. So tell us where we can find you.
Yeah, so capitalverified.com is where I have my one-on-one bookings, and my consultative services. So that's either the investor passport or the due diligence service. I do offer free training. I do offer paid training. I've got a vault of replays of webinars and workshops and informational, Zooms that I've held that people can subscribe to for a nominal fee. And so all of that can be found on my website at capitalverified.com.
Love
Awesome.
it.
And where can people find you on social media if they want to peruse your hilarious content?
Yeah. So what I'll say is due diligence and underwriting and all of this stuff is very boring. So I try to make it fun and funny and playful, because like nobody wants the nitnoid details blasted on them as they're scrolling. So you can find me at melpalmer.me on Instagram, and that's primarily where I am on social media.
Awesome.
Awesome.
Cool, Mel. Thank you so much for coming and hanging out with us. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks. Thanks, guys. All right. Well, we'll catch you next time. I hope you take advantage of Mel's resources, visit her website, follow her on social media, and learn how to be the responsible investor that is honestly so easy to be. Right, guys? Take care. Thanks so much.